Welcome to Life Source Church. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or SoundCloud.
We're excited about today's testimony. We're going to be hearing from Jeff and Jen Stappenbeck. As you know, Jeff had been an intern here, and we were blessed to have him for a year serving on our ministry staff with us. And God has taught them a lot of great stuff about stewardship, and we want to hear that from them today. So look forward and welcome Jeff and Jen.
So I didn't grow up in a Christian home. It was actually through my father getting sick while I was a college student with brain cancer that God started working on my heart. And it was about 6 months after that, in my dorm room, I was struggling with some real specific sins that I couldn't get freed from for the first time in my life. I was really struggling with that and realizing I wanted to stop doing things that nobody else knew about except for me in private. And that's when I realized, so I was reading Romans 6. I need to identify with Christ and his death and resurrection. Became a Christian. I was probably 23 years old at that time, 24. Go ahead, babe.
I grew up here at Life Source. Pretty much my family has always gone here or another church when we lived in Springfield. And so I always grew up memorizing my memory verses and getting all the verses awards and trying to be really good because I wanted to please people. And I realized when I was about 12 that wasn't going to be good enough, that trying to get people to like me wasn't going to be good enough, and it was too hard. And I kind of fell into this deep depression of, I'll never be good enough. No one will ever really love me. So when I was 13, I was really struggling with depression and even suicidal thoughts. And it was then I came to a conference here actually at Life Source with my mom and just heard the gospel very clearly, and it really got my heart. And so I surrendered to the Lord and asked him to save me. And I've been at Life Source kind of since then, back and forth with college and getting married. And so I've really been at Life Source probably since I was 5.
Yeah, so once we got married, we moved back to this area. We were living in upstate New York, and we've been here since we've been married, so almost 4 years now. Yep. So obviously, growing up in a non-Christian home or a marginally Christian home, I would say my mom and dad would have probably professed to be Christians, but anyways, they really didn't teach me a whole lot about stewardship, to use that term, and it really took a long time. It was actually after being a Christian while I was in college, attending a church in college that I started to want to give and to learn a little bit about that. But I had debt, I had school debt, as well as consumer credit card debt, and really didn't have a whole lot of people teaching me the ins and outs of that. It was while I was at Bible college that I really started to learn the value of being a faithful steward with my money. And I would say really I didn't experience a whole lot of freedom from that. Or freedom by being a good steward until I started practicing that at Bible college, and then once we got married, it really was where things started clicking. I continue to grow in that.
And growing up in a Christian home, I learned about stewardship from the beginning. My parents always gave 10% or more, and that was just how I grew up. They kept a budget, and so for me, growing up, it was whatever money I had, I gave some to God because that was just how I grew up. But it probably wasn't until I was older and got my first job at 16 that I made that choice for myself and kind of said, okay, what do I think about giving God my first and best? And it's always been part of something I've done because where I gave, we've talked about, my heart followed. And truly, giving to missions trips probably is the biggest thing that I did growing up, was giving to different kids that went on missions trip. And your heart does go with them. So I've kind of always given, always known about stewardship because I kind of grew up with that. So when we got married, I'd never had debt. I was always very budgeted, very strict with my money because of how my parents were and just had taught me, and probably on the one end of the spectrum where I didn't want to spend any money because I wanted to save it. But we got married and brought into marriage Jeff's school debt. And looking back, I think, why did we do that? Why did we get married with that much school debt? But I'm glad we did, and I didn't regret it. Just that one Sunday afternoon when we talked about it, I regretted it. But anyway, so he brought in more debt, like half of a house worth of school debt. And I didn't have a college degree. We were newly married. He had a job, and I was looking for a nanny job. And it was very scary to look at our budget and say, how are we going to do this? How are we going to pay off school loans? Because we want to go into ministry, and you can't have debt to do that. And so we just decided from the beginning, we set up a budget. And part of that was giving. Part of that was, okay, we're going to trust God to give the first off the top, and then, we'll see what happens. And within 16 months, we paid off this ginormous school loan. And we didn't have everything. We didn't have smartphones. We made different choices, but God provided. And we still talk about paying off that debt as one of our greatest accomplishments. And we really had fun doing it at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I think Jen gets a little bit, I don't know, she doesn't always like to share the amount, but I think looking back, I know this is how God provided, and the significant amount was about $45,000 that we did in 16 months. And it's funny looking back, like, I remember that moment, that Sunday afternoon that we really sat down. I had just started my job, and we had gotten a couple of paychecks in, and so we were looking, well, it wasn't even a couple, it was just like one, and we were looking at that, and I had that job, and Jen didn't at the time, and we had, all of these cost of living things that we had to work through and figure out, okay, this money's going here, this money's going here, and by the end of that, we realized what's left over, and then we saw, we opened up my account, for Sally Mae, and we were looking on Sally Mae's website, looking at all of the loans and the amounts and the total on the bottom, and there was that kind of just brick in the stomach moment, kind of like, wow, how is this going to happen? But we trusted God, and we just kept moving forward from there, and it took a little bit of time, but you ended up landing a job, and from there we were able to figure out how to live on one of the two incomes. And then my income, actually, I had a sales job, a total commission job, which I never would have thought I would ever be comfortable living on a commission job. But because we had a base income with Jen's, when we were able to live on that, all of my commission was just there now, free to go straight to debt. So the harder I worked and the more I sold, the more money we made. And so we really did have a lot of fun seeing how fast we could pay it off. And we did the debt snowball, the Dave Ramsey debt snowball. And we started paying off the smaller stuff first and then working our way up. But it was really exciting, and it was a great time in our life. Just looking back on it now, it's caused me to grow a ton, not only trusting God, but also just trusting the goodness of my wife, her heart in wanting to partner with me, not only in money, but in all of our life. We're a team. And I think that was one of the biggest phrases that we would go back and forth, and especially some of the times when we would look at the budget and for whatever reason we were trying to figure out how to work through it. We often ended with just reminding each other that we're a team when we're doing this together. And man, I tell you, it's great to have a teammate like that. It was really great that she was willing to marry me, because I don't know if I would have done that either. Looking back, I just can't believe that you did it, and I'm glad that you did. If you didn't, I don't know, I'd probably still be in debt right now, truth be told. So
when I was maybe 8 weeks away from my due date with our first child, I worked as a nanny, had a fantastic job, more income than my first nanny job when we were paying off debt. And my employers kind of talked to me and just said, we decided that you bringing a baby isn't going to work. And I wasn't really willing to do childcare so that I could do childcare. So they said, so we've actually already found someone else, and you're done as soon as you want to be done. So that was a huge, huge loss of income. I mean, we were living off of that and more, and we enjoyed the extra income and enjoyed giving. We, were able to do so much. And 6 weeks away from having a baby, we are down one income. Jeff was working at the church as an intern. He was a student full-time and then working part-time at his job. And we've never lived on part-time income before. So it was really scary. But again, we went out to dinner that night that I found out, and we kind of looked at each other, and, we both said, we're really not worried. Like, we trust God. We don't know how it's going to work, but we know that He's provided before, so we know He'll provide again. But it was a struggle. I remember looking at the budget right before we had our baby and being like, okay, we have this much income and we need twice this a week than what we're used to. But we never went without those 6 months that we lived on His part-time salary. I don't know if you have more to say about that.
Yeah, so no, it's true. We really didn't. Just kind of thinking through the timeline. Part of Jen and I being a team together has been to pursue kind of a life mission to serve God with all of our lives, and part of that has come out with my calling to be in the ministry full time, as well as Jen being a full-time mom and serving the church. She's really got a passion for women's ministry. And so with that, we had been continuing to position ourselves in that way. And so what we do with our money was part of building the momentum towards continuing to pursue God with that. And so, I mean, looking back on it now, it's no wonder God provided, not because necessarily of us what we want to do with our lives, but because we walk with them through our finances, through that area of our life, growing as a team together, and then we show God did provide in many ways. Like when I went to the intern position and went part-time, my employer was willing to allow me to be part-time and provide us with health insurance, full-time health insurance still. So we weren't worried about that. And then when Jen lost her job, we had learned how to live on less than what we made. Yeah, we were enjoying the benefits of making more, but we were really able to walk with God through that and start to make different choices. And again, He provided with unemployment for a while for you, and so that gave us time to do that. And then it's just really cool because looking back now, I would say, again, we just learned to be a teammate through it, and to see teammates through it, and to see that really we're doing this with God. Not only are we teammates together, but God's on our team too. And so if He's called us to something greater than ourselves, He's going to provide for us to be a part of that. So yeah, I guess I would say that too.
Jeff even mentioned when I lost the job, and like a couple weeks after that, he looked at me and he said, I think God is protecting you. You don't have to quit your job. You wanted to be a stay-at-home mom anyways, and God took it from you in a good way, not in a bad way. And actually, just sharing, last night I babysat the kids that I used to nanny for, and I left going, I'm so glad I don't have to work anymore. I'm so glad I get to stay home with my little boy and enjoy, the ministry of motherhood. And so even in that, I would have never gotten rid of my job on my own back then, but I'm so glad. And I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade, the house we could have bought by now if I had had that job. Like, I wouldn't trade that for what I've had the past 10 months with my son.
Yeah, I mean, if I remember that now, thanks for saying that, babe, I saw it as a rescue for Jen in a lot of ways, and a rescue for our son. Like, I believe that God, looking back now, He was providing the perfect environment for our son to come into this world, to have the right attention and care that he needed for those early stages in his life. And God's continued to provide that for us. Even now, I'm full-time now at work, and we've had newer challenges financially as well. Housing has been an issue for us recently, but in it all, God has continued to really be faithful to provide us with all that we need in order to really care for our son, to be the husband and wife that we're supposed to be, and the Christ followers that He's enabled us to be. And so we just got to be responsible with what He gives us, and it's a joy when we do that. All right, so when we went through some financial crisis, when Jen lost her job, and even more recently when our housing situation changed, it was really simple for me. It was never a question of whether or not we continued to give. Like, we had just learned the practice of whatever money we have, whatever the percentage it is, we're going to give a percentage. And we had made commitments beyond our percentage to certain people that we think God has called us to be a part of their service, missionaries, etc. It was just never a question. We would just continue that. We didn't think we needed to worry about that at that time. So we just did. So it wasn't even a question for me. I'm not sure if you, Jen, how you feel about that.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever a question when we went through the hard time to stop giving or to say, well, we need this percentage for our income, because we've seen, not just in our own lives, in our families' lives, in extended families' lives, in our church's lives, just when you're faithful to God and do what he says, he does bring blessing. I mean, he doesn't bring thousands of dollars and, all of that all the time, but he does provide. So I don't look back and remember that it was a question. I know we continue to do what we had always done, because that's what we had committed to. And we knew from the beginning that if we're faithful to God, he will be faithful to us. He said that, he said that countless times in his word. So it wasn't really even a question for us.
Yeah. So if I could tell you one thing, and this is a one thing that I continue to grow in, but finances are one of the greatest places, one of the best places, if not the best place to trust and test this out, is trust God. Just depend on him. That's the one thing.
The one thing I would say, I think that's obviously the most important, to trust God. After that, if you're married and with a spouse, be on the same team with finances, because I've seen personally people whose marriages break up because of finances. And that's something, I can honestly say we've never fought about finances. We may have discussed about the budget, but we've never, ever had an argument about finances, because God has just been so faithful, and we're on the same team. It's been sometimes looking at the budget going, okay, I don't know where this is coming from, but it's never been he's the enemy and money's what I need. It's no, we're a team, we're working on this together. So after trusting God, be on the same team with your spouse.